Great, so thanks for coming along to see the talk. I am a director at answerthepublic.com, which is a tool that some of you may be familiar with. I am also audience strategy director at PropellerNet, which is a search agency. I am here to talk to you today about what we call search listening. So it's the idea that you can take really interesting consumer insights from how people search. I'm also going to talk about the Spice Girls, just to liven things up a little bit. You may think there's an odd connection there. There is a connection, I promise. And it's this. Consumers don't tell marketers what they want, what they really, really want. But they do tell Google what they want. I think the truthfulness that we have with Google and the way that we use Google as almost a confessional box, we tell it our deepest, darkest thoughts, means that it's actually a hugely valuable source of insight. And I believe this as an industry in search. I think that long-tail searches are grossly undervalued. I think there's too much emphasis, and I understand why. We all operate in a world that's driven by commercials. We need to make sales for clients, for the people that we work for. But there's a huge amount of potential in long-tail search, and hopefully, as we go through this talk, I will help you to find some of that potential. This is a talk by Stoney DeGator, who obviously writes a lot for Search Engine Land. I'm not going to read it to you, take a second to read it, but I really, really believe in this, and I think this is my point around generic keywords versus long tail. If you just focus on the generics, you're looking at symptoms, and actually the long tail can help you understand problems and actual consumer insights. Another quote that I absolutely love, there's a book called Everybody Lies by a guy called Seth Stephens-Davidovitz. He wrote a whole thesis on, it was just before Obama got into power in America, and he predicted the outcome of that election based on how people were searching in different states in America. All the polls had it that Obama wouldn't get into power, and he predicted that he would, and that was based on search behavior. So check out the book Everybody Lies if you've not read it. It's fascinating. It touches on sex, drugs, politics. Again, all those interesting things that we tell Google that we might not be so truthful about in our real world. So yeah, again, the Google data set that we can all access as marketers is huge when it comes to the human psyche. Why is it such an important data set? As I said, it's huge. There's billions of people searching every day. They're not all just searching commercial generic keywords. They are talking to Google like it's a confidant, a friend. It's free, you know, whether you're working in an agency with a huge budget for tools or you're a sort of one-man band, you can tap into Google suggestions, just looking at what Google is suggesting when people search for absolutely no cost at all. And there's zero research bias, and this is really the key one for me. I think, you know, we can all run surveys, we can run focus groups, we can do all of those sort of traditional marketing research projects, and there is always that consideration that you've got people trying to tell you how they think they might behave in a scenario, or trying to answer how they think that you want them to. In Google, they're turning to Google in that moment. It's not a research sort of hypothetical scenario, so you get really pure, true data. I say this a lot in explaining search listening to people. Just have a think about the things that you might have told Google over the past few months, and I bet there's something in there that you wouldn't tell someone else in your life, whether it's your partner right through to your doctor. As I said, we turn to Google for those real sort of in-the-moment life events that really have big significance. I've just looked in Google Suggest for a few examples. So we treat Google like we're having conversations with it, and with voice search on the rise, that's going to happen more and more. But this is people who've just gone to Google, having just done or experienced something. So I've just ate raw chicken, I've just ate mouldy bread, and they're turning to Google because they need Google to sort of fix the situation for them. There's some weird ones in here, so find your own. I've just been dumped, I've just been paid, I've just been robbed, and I'm turning to Google to find the solution to that situation. This one, I've just cheated on my girlfriend. That one I'm like, this person's cheated on their girlfriend. They can't tell anyone else in their life, but they are telling Google. And that's insight, weirdly, that we can tap into. Just chipped my tooth, all sorts. Through to this one. This one really stood out for me. I was just going to cap it at 3 examples because 4 starts to get a bit excessive, but I've just dropped my iPhone in the toilet. When we're talking about kind of big catastrophic life events, I think for some people that absolutely would be. And they've obviously turned to a different device this time to get to Google to find a solution. As I said, I'm from Answer the Public. If you're not familiar with Answer the Public, it's a tool that you can use a free version of. There is also a pro version which has some enhanced features. It's answerthepublic.com. Those of you who do know it will be familiar with this guy. He's called The Seeker. He's quite divisive. Some people love him, some people absolutely hate him. But Answer the Public, you can just stick in any keyword and it basically does that job of all the kind of autocomplete on suggestions for you. So the reason we built it was because me and my colleagues were getting sick of doing exactly what I was showing you on the previous slide. So that is going in and putting a generic term into Google and having to go through the alphabet, go through lots of question terms, prepositions, all that sort of thing to find insight. So this is the sort of stuff you get out of Answer the Public. Put a term in and you'll get a number of wheels like this. This is the question wheel, just to zoom in a bit. You'll see I've put Florida in here as an example, but you start to get questions around Florida where people have used which. So which Florida key is the nicest, for example. And it does, as I said, it does this for all sorts of different kind of joining terms and then alphabetical stuff as well. So it's really a time saver if you're interested in this kind of insight. More recently, I suppose, we've expanded our thinking a little bit and landed on this idea of search listening, which obviously I'm talking about now. Search listening, for me, I find it fascinating that in marketing, we're in a world where social listening is a huge industry, right? There's people out here, I'm sure there's some people in the room today whose job is actually to be a social listener. They're a social analyst, and they take all their insight from how people behave on social media. I actually find it a bit bizarre now that, we've not evolved enough to think that actually we can take just as much, potentially in some circumstances, richer insight from search. And I'd love to see us get to a place where actually search listening is an industry as big as social listening, and there's so many tools that we can use to get to that insight. And people have jobs that are solely based on search listening, so not using keyword research to look at commercials, generic terms, using the interesting sort of nitty-gritty stuff that people tell Google. Back to the Spice Girls. I did promise I was going to talk about them. I'm going to use the Fab Five to go through some different examples of interesting things that you can pull out of search listening and search data. So, starting with baby, where does baby lead me to? She leads me to the parenting industry quite nicely as an example. So starting with buggies. This is two branches that I've pulled just from putting the word buggies into Answer the Public. So the for branch, so any searches that are buggies for, and the with branch, so any searches that are buggies with. I've underlined some examples here just to show you some stuff that starts to get interesting. So particularly from, I suppose, like a product development point of view, this stuff's quite interesting. So any searches with for and with start to tell you a bit more about the product or the service or whatever it is you do, and how people want that thing. So, buggies for tall toddlers, buggies for running. People want that product in that way that's going to fit their lifestyle. So my first tip really around search listening would be think about how determiners impact search behavior across the purchase journey. And what I mean by that is we can see how people search in Answer the Public. We can see sort of the most popular reports that get run. And more often than not, I see these kind of generics, so buggies, going in there, which is great, and you'll get a load of insight from that. But think about the different ways and the different kind of possessive words that people attach. So a buggy versus my buggy, the buggy, our buggy. And think about, I know this is a very, very generalized version of a customer journey. There are millions of different journeys, and they're often much more complex than this, but bear with me just putting a sort of generic one in there. But searches at the start of the purchase journey are very, very different, and just by changing what you put into something like Answer the Public, my buggy, the buggy, our buggy, you see a whole load of difference. So I've popped my buggy in this time, and you start to see things like what's my buggy worth, when should I buy my buggy, how to clean my buggy, and certainly the value and the cleaning thing. For me, there's a really interesting content opportunity here. By understanding the audience who own their buggy and therefore search my buggy, you can go back to the audience who are looking to buy a buggy and anticipate needs that they don't seem to realise until they own a buggy, so actually resale value becomes a thing. So might you be able to talk about that right at the beginning, anticipating their needs, as I say. So yeah, with Baby Spice, use generic nouns to explore behaviour right at the start of a purchase journey, but add those determiners, so my, our, whatever it is, post-purchase, to explore a different kind of search behaviour. On to Sporty. She leads me nicely into the world of football. I have very randomly picked Liverpool fans, so apologies if there's any Liverpool fans in the room who object to anything that comes up here. What's really interesting with how we search in Google around almost tribal behaviour, I'd say, you'll see here there's a whole load of confirmation bias going on here. So there's people who are looking for other people who share their beliefs around Liverpool fans, whether that's positive or negative. So, Liverpool fans forum, Liverpool fans Twitter, I would imagine those are Liverpool fans who are looking for a home online where they can interact with other Liverpool fans. Things around Liverpool fans fighting, crying, possibly Everton fans or fans of another club who actually want to find stuff that they can use to kind of stir up the pot online. If we extend that out a little bit more, again, you start adding the alphabeticals and you get more and more stuff. Certainly the top two, again, Liverpool fans are the worst. Logically, there is no reason to type that into Google, but you're doing it, or they're doing it, because they're looking for a community of people who think like them. And it's a really interesting way that we search. I had a few more examples here. Burning shirts banned from Europe. Crying, again, I don't imagine that's a fan looking for that. So the tip here is use spaces within Google Autosuggest. I'm here from Answer the Public, but I use Answer the Public and I use Autosuggest as much as each other. They're kind of interchangeable. So you can use spaces within Autosuggest in Google as kind of wildcards to get insight from a really broad starting point. So what I mean here, we've stepped away from Liverpool fans now, we're just looking at fans quite broadly. So why do fans hate? And we can go back and put an extra space in between do and fans, and you start to see, at this moment in time, what are the biggest hates that exist in football that people are curious about. So Blackpool fans hating the owners, Liverpool fans hating the Sun, etc., etc. So some really rich sort of attitudinal insights that we're pulling out here. We can change hate to love to get a more positive view on what's going on. Again, go back, put that space in. So there's some non-football examples coming through here, but why do Celtic fans love Ireland? Why do Rangers fans love the Queen? That sort of thing. And we can shift from attitudinal to behavioural as well. So switch out love and start looking at sing. I find football chants absolutely fascinating. So why do Rangers fans sing Penny Arcade? So this is all the things that people are curious about. And we started at quite a broad point. We know that football fans sing. So we've got why do fans sing? And you can go back and use those spaces to get kind of the filler, if you like, which is where you take your insight from. So with Sporty Spice, we learn, use search listening to explore tribalism. Think about what it is in your industry. I know football's an obvious one. At PropellerNet a few years ago, we worked with Nielsen Holidays, and we did a whole campaign around snowboarders versus skiers. There was lots of stuff like snowboarders searching things like skiers are douchebags. Weird things that, again, there's no logical reason to type that into Google, but it's looking for a community of people like you. And use those space wildcards to kind of plug gaps and find insight at quite a broad level. Posh. I was going to go luxury hotels or something with Posh, but then I remembered that actually, she's quite ashamed of her Spice Girl career, so I focused in on fashion for her. Back to Answer the Public with this example. I've just popped dresses as a term into Answer the Public this time, and a specific branch that I want to focus in on is the like branch. So all of the companies that come back on this report are winning effectively in the search space for dresses, and I say that knowing that typically to win at search you're number one in Google. But for me, if I'm running a company that sells dresses and people are searching dresses like my brand, I know that I'm embedded in their heart and their mind, and actually if they can't afford me or there's something not quite right, they know me and they like what it is that I do, and that's really interesting. So for me, if you look at that like branch with your product, that's a competitor set that you absolutely want to be in. You want people to be aspiring to have products or buy products like yours. Keeping with the kind of fashion theme, but moving from dresses to coats, and again looking at that like branch, you'll see here a very similar thing. So we have a lot of the brands coming through, but you start to see personalities, and for me this is like in the PR space, a really, really rich insight that you can take. So who are the personalities who are particularly influential around a product? Here we have Meghan Markle, we have Kate Middleton, we also have Mrs. Maisel, and that's really interesting for me. So characters that become influencers that, again, you might not think of. I appreciate that Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton are probably off limits for a lot of brands in terms of any kind of partnership or collaboration or content you want to create, but try it with your world, your industry, your products, and see who are the influential personalities coming through there, and you might want to team up with them if you can. So search listening tip number 3, use the like searches to uncover influence. And this, as I said, it works particularly well in kind of fashion and beauty and more appearance-related stuff where obviously influence is more of a thing. I've broadened it slightly just to build on this and to make another point here, but I've put hairstyles into Answer the Public. And again, looking at that like branch, you'll see here, I can't say that I would have ever thought that people like Anthea Turner would be an influencer in the hair space, but here we see it. And it's funny, there's a whole load of names in there that you just think, what? But I think if you were looking at hairstyles and you went online to think about who are the influencers in the hairstyle world, you might find yourself on Pinterest, you might find yourself on Instagram. They're great sources of insight, but actually if you're looking at a really broad set of people and you don't want that kind of, the gorgeous people on Instagram with the kind of glossy blonde ombre hair. You want to see what real women out there in the world want from their hairstyles. They're telling Google, and it's a much more representative sample, actually, Google, if you think about the people who are using it compared to some of those social networks. So yeah, take influence from the strangest of places. So yeah, explore that like branch, and as I said, do it with whatever industry you're working in, and look out for those unexpected influencers. On to Jerry. Jerry leads me nicely, Ginger, into the food world. So this time I've popped chicken recipes on the left and breakfast recipes on the right into Answer the Public. So before we were looking at that like branch specifically and what insights we can take from that, this time we're looking at the for branch. What I really like here is that if you're working with a new client, or if you're a business that doesn't have any condensed, consolidated audience insight, you don't have any personas or anything to work with like that, I would say you need it. But this is a really good starting point. This is people who are looking at the thing that you do, the product you sell, and with that for qualifier, they are telling you the labels they give themselves and how they see themselves in relation to your product and what they need from it. So for chicken recipes, we can see, there's lots of stuff around parenting, for a family, for solo people, chicken recipes for one, for a crowd, for dogs even, for runners again over on the right looking at breakfast recipes. So there's very, very literal labels that you can take from search listing and build that out into personas. So yeah, focus on those for searches to understand that. But don't just focus on the literal labels, which is what we've just looked at. Look at what I call inferred labels as well. So where someone's searching for chicken recipes for dinner party, you can use that literally. You can create content on dinner party chicken recipes, and that will help you in search, obviously. But think about the broader implications of that. Someone's looking for chicken recipes for a dinner party. If I'm a supermarket, and obviously chicken recipes would be fairly sort of solid territory for me to play in, I'm thinking, okay, there is a subset of my audience that are actually really sociable people, and what more can we do for them around dinner parties? Don't just take the literal from that. Similarly, we've got Ramadan, so what else can you do in that space to help people? Lots of medical conditions, lots of health stuff, lots of weight loss stuff. I think I've pulled out Mother's Day as well. So again, go back to other methodologies. So Mother's Day, if I was a brand and I decided that actually recipes for Mother's Day was something I was really interested in, I'd be tempted to go back to the kind of wildcard auto-suggest piece that I talked about and stick the space at the beginning, and what else is it that people are really, really looking for in the Mother's Day world, and how much of that can we own? So you start at that one really niche point and you can broaden it out, but always led by what it is that consumers are searching for. So, as I said, Jerry, she teaches us to use search listening to uncover labels, both literal and inferred, that our audience is giving itself, and you can use that to build up personas and content strategy and thinking about how much of a market you want to own. On to the fifth Spice Girl, Leeds' very own. It felt quite apt to mention her today. We have Scary Spice. Where can I go with Scary Spice? I'm going to go Brexit. So whether you are pro-Leave, pro-Remain, we'll throw that to one side. I think we can all agree it's all a bit scary at the moment. But it's interesting because search listening is so, so rich in this space of kind of societal stuff, political stuff. So we can pop Brexit into Google. And you'll get a load of interesting stuff anyway. And then again, go back and put those question terms in. So will Brexit happen? Why vote for Brexit? All these sorts of things. This is really cool because this is like a snapshot in time. In terms of, we get a lot of questions that answer the public around volumes. If you're familiar with the wheels, we have like the green dots on them now have gradients so that you can see the darker green, the more popular that search is at that moment in time. What I will say is it's not a volume thing. Obviously, these are long-tail editorial terms. If you put them into AdWords, you're not going to get high volumes, but people are searching them because Google is suggesting it, based on what other people have searched for. So please don't discount based on keyword volume. It's kind of not the point when you're looking at search listening like this. So yeah, we can do a snapshot of a moment in time. These are the top questions that people have around Brexit at this moment in time, or as of Monday or Tuesday this week. And this is really interesting as well. I think you can take a lot from this. So you get a feel that there's some people who perhaps aren't as on it with the political agenda. They're looking at things like, is Brexit over? I've been away from it for a while. Is it over yet? Lots of more complex stuff. So, is Theresa May for Brexit? People wanting to get a richer understanding. So my fifth tip on this would be use search listening to understand the most pertinent questions and sentiment around important topics. Whether they're societal or commercial and tied to your business, that's fine. I'm just using Brexit as the example here. But it comes back to that point that I made earlier, that actually we ask Google the questions that we might be afraid to ask other people. And you might be down the pub and you feel silly asking someone a certain question, so you just whip out your phone and Google it. But it's the real questions that we actually want to know the answers to, and it's the true things that we're concerned about that come into Google. We've recently built a new feature in Answer the Public, which is really interesting here, and I want to show you. It is in the pro version of the tool, but you can absolutely do this manually yourself. What it does is, provided you've run a report on the same term in the past, you can run another report today, and then you can compare the two date ranges. And what this means is you can get a sense of what queries are trending. So we're going to look at April versus June. Again, coming back to Brexit, it's something that I look at quite a lot in Answer the Public. And what you'll see is these green boxes is anything that since April has come up as a new sort of rising query that people have. As I said, you can do this manually if you just remember to snapshot the top suggestions within Google on a certain day and come back and compare them yourself. But you can do it this way in Answer the Public much quicker. So what we can see here, there's lots of queries that suddenly pop up around the Brexit Party, who obviously weren't a thing in April, but now I'm running the report in June. There's more interest there. Over on the right here, I thought it was interesting. So the white ones are what was being surfaced previously, and we've got lots of things about holidays, the pound, law firms, the NHS. There's a little bit about business, but actually if you look at what's come up since then, there's a lot more stuff about affecting the economy, affecting trade, businesses. So concerns shifted slightly, and we can see that based on how people are searching. So yeah, do this for whatever it is you work in. It doesn't have to be Brexit. Remember that search listing will give you those truest insights because there's no judgment, there's nothing going on. We turn to Google looking for honest answers and analyze those changing queries over time because then you can start to track and understand sentiment. So just to recap on the 5 lessons that hopefully you've taken from search listening. With Baby, we looked at thinking about the entire purchase journey, so thinking about A, related to your product, and thinking about my. With Sporty, we looked at making use of wildcard spaces and looking out for tribalism. With Posh, we looked at like searches and how that can really, really play out in influence. I'd suggest if any of you are in PR teams, that's a really useful tactic for you to start exploring. With Ginger, we looked at focusing on 4 searches to uncover different labels, both literal and inferred. And with Scary, looking at audience shifts over time by running those comparison searches. So I'm very aware that we're at SearchLeeds today, and I've talked about keyword research, I suppose, in a slightly abstract way. And if there's any of you here thinking, this is all great, but how am I going to use it in my day-to-day life? This is another quote that I really, really love from Will Reynolds, who says he's not trying to be a better SEO professional anymore, he's just trying to be a better marketer. And I would suggest that to be a better marketer and to be a better SEO professional, you really need to understand your audiences. It's all very well looking at commercial keywords, creating content, but if you don't understand that intent and who's the audience searching for it and what do they actually need, you're only going to get so far. You're going to have people bouncing off your site and going to a competitor who understands them and gets them a lot more. So please think like that. And if you really don't believe that, then think about your colleagues, as SEOs and people who have access to keyword research and feel comfortable operating in this world, looking at keywords and search behavior. I think we are gatekeepers to a huge, huge source of massively rich insight. So think about your colleagues, whether they're in your immediate team or more widely in the business that you operate in. Think about how they could make use of your search data and what sort of audience insights you could be feeding to them to make them better at their job as well. And to end on a Spice Girls pun, I'm going to stop right there. Thank you very much.